this. All right, and this is for those that can't come on here. Okay, well, welcome again, everyone. So I am going to first ask you guys, and this is going to be a question that we'll come back to later, and that is, since last week, I know it's only been a week, but does anybody feel like they know Jesus just a little bit more? Did anybody get a little bit more familiar with Jesus? You don't have to answer that obviously now. What has happened since last week in order for you to create new good habits to get to know him? If you had this desire, this feeling to just be wanting to have this Christmas holiday to be different than it was, not even just since the loss of your child, but just since the very beginning of time. How can we be different and looking beyond all of the decorations, the loud music and the gifts and just all of that stuff that comes along with the holidays, that they have just so diluted the celebration of Jesus' birth? So that's something to think about. Last week, we talked a little bit about light and how we were mentioning about the Christmas tree. I think, Sharon, you were saying when you look at the lights on the Christmas tree, instead of feeling a trigger about Christmas, that you were saying that it's the light of Jesus because Jesus came into the darkness. Light is mentioned 272 times in the Bible and is in 235 verses. I also wanted to just say a little side trivia is that people in general spend about 45 hours preparing for Christmas, which seems so low considering, including the decorating. Let me let Vivian in. The decorating and the shopping and the wrapping and just everything. And on average, the average person spends about $1,000 during Christmas. Now, I even still think that that's considerably low in the grand scheme of things. But think about 40 some hours of time that you invest in Christmas. Not that you're not going to do anything like that, but if you had 40 hours that you can invest into God's word just to get to know Jesus a lot better. We always manage somehow to make the time to get to do all those things, but there he is, just sitting there, with his word, and he's like, I got you. I've got this way for you to get through the holidays so that you can have the joy. But you're like, oh, I got to go out. Like today, I'll be honest, I went to Hobby Lobby, and I'm thinking about all the places I'm going before the holidays. I'm going to see Marseille and her family for Thanksgiving, and then I come home and I'm going to Palm Springs and visiting a friend. And then I'm like, when am I going to go down and cut a tree in Oregon? That's my big thing. I'm like, I'm in Oregon. I actually bought a fake tree half price in Hobby Lobby today, and I was mortified. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's succumbed to this, but it doesn't matter. It's something that I looked at that wasn't a good use of my time to try to hurry up and get a real tree out in the woods and drag it and all that kind of stuff. So in the morning when I get up, because I know all of the things are going to come at me, you guys know all the things that are going to come at you. It's so easy to go and throw a load in the laundry. It's so easy to go and, like with me, I've got 3 dogs sitting here staring at me. They want to go out and run, but I'm always like closing them downstairs, and I sit down and I listen to Bible recap or whatever. I read part of my devotionals and just to get started, because it throws my day when I let all these other things come in. Now, you've heard this so many times. I get it. But you guys, the reality is that we want to make Christmas different this year. We want to make it better to glorify the Lord. We don't want to be a victim of all the distractions that Satan tries to bring into us and to tear us down. Amen? Amen. Okay. So let me just say, for God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ, 2 Corinthians 4:6. Okay, so Sharon and Kay, I have 2 questions for you. I have 1 question for you, but for both of you to answer. So Sharon was talking about that Mark's been gone about 30 years, and I believe Matthew's been gone for 10K?
Yeah, this year was 10.
10, okay. Hey, and I've been somewhat keeping track. I mean, I never imagined that when Rick and Kay made the announcement that Matthew, I'll never forget where I was, made the announcement about Matthew, And I was like, just reflecting on that, and never in my wildest dreams did I think 2 years later I was going to be having a conversation with this woman. And yeah, so here we are. And we are still missing them. Who's in the waiting room here? Admit. Okay, so the question is, and I guess I could start with Sharon. No pressure, Sharon. What got you out of bed, we'll just say, every day, pretty much for those first few years? Did you have something that you just realized that this has got to be my purpose to keep on going?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Because at first it was hard to, there didn't seem to be any reason to get out of bed. Mark was our youngest child, and we were looking forward to his last 2 years of high school. The other kids were out of the house or almost out of the house, graduated, getting married, moving on. And these were our last 2 years to just prepare Mark and to enjoy him, just to have fun with our youngest child. And so, when your kids are in high school, they become your social life. I don't know how many of you have experienced that yet, but your whole world revolves around what they are doing and being a part of that. And we loved it. We loved doing that with our kids. And Mark was going to be our last hurrah as we prepared for that empty nest. And so here I am. What was my purpose? Now I didn't have a child in the home to care for. I recognize that so much of what I did had become my identity. So who was I? I had to figure out who I was as a child of God, really. And that didn't matter what I was doing. I began to realize it doesn't matter what I'm doing. My purpose is still the same, and that is to glorify God. But for me, especially in the early years, it was thinking, okay, today, whatever is on my plate today is God's will for me. And so it could be that all I'm going to do today is put in a load of wash, get up in the morning and put in a load of wash. Or maybe that his will for me is to sit at the table with my Bible and journal and just cry. That will be to honor him and to glorify him. Somehow that's going to glorify him. But really, my theology is what drove me to get out of bed, because the scriptures teach that before the foundation of the world was laid, he had created good things for me to do. And I just relied on thinking, if he has created good things for me to do today, then he's equipped me for it. He has me ready for it. And so get out of bed. That was the first step of the day. That was the task that I started out with. And when I would get out of bed, I would go to my pink chair and I would have my Bible. And I think I shared this last week, but I would have my Bible and my journal and 2 devotionals, My Utmost for His Highest and Streams in the Desert. And I would write in my journal how I was feeling that day. I held nothing back. And then I would read 1 chapter from Psalms and 1 chapter from Proverbs and the dated devotional from those 2 books. And soon I felt as though I was having a conversation with the Lord, as he seemed to be responding sometimes to what I had written in my journal with words that had been written many, many years before I was even born. And those scriptures, and I love what Jackie is encouraging us to do, is to dig deep into the word. And digging deep for you may be just 1 verse, to look at 1 verse each morning. And allowing him to draw you deeper into his heart. That is what's going to give you purpose for getting out of bed, is understanding his character and understanding his calling. And that no matter what you're doing, it's your identity is in who you are in Jesus, which last week, Jackie really encouraged us to better understand.
I love that. And they're just simple little steps, just little baby steps. But I love that you said it was your theology. And that's the foundation. 100%. That's awesome, Sharon. Thank you. Okay, Kay.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for letting me join you tonight. Sounds weird in some ways to say I've been looking forward to joining you, because, it's pain. a lot of pain, sorrow, suffering, you know, in your faces and in your lives and in mine as well. So, but in that, I have, in my own suffering and grief in the last 10 years, it has been these kinds of gatherings that have fed me, you know, emotionally and spiritually and relationally. There's something incredibly, comfort just doesn't even feel like a strong enough word. There's kind of a kinship that makes me just not feel alone in the universe when I'm with other mothers. There's just something about knowing, even if I never know the details of your story and how you lost your child, even if I were just to see you and all we did was give each other a hug and somebody said she's lost a child, just in our hug and our shared tears, you know, are looking into each other's eyes. There is something that is of great value and great beauty and great worth. And so thank you for letting me join you and share our grief and our hope and all of that together. So it's really sweet to be with you. As Jackie said, it's been 10 years since our youngest son, Matthew, took his life. He was 27. He had lived with mental illness almost all of his life. As our youngest, I knew he was different than his older siblings really fast. I mean, toddler. But it never occurred to me that those differences had anything to do with mental illness. I just thought he was different and, you know, he'd outgrow this or he'd outgrow that. And he didn't. It all just kept getting worse. And by the time he was 7, he was diagnosed with clinical depression. And I could still weep the first time he sat on my lap as a little 7-year-old and just said, "Mommy, I'm just so sad." And then just saying, "Buddy, what makes you sad?" I didn't know what to do. "Buddy, what makes you sad?" And as he went through all the different things, and it didn't get really better. He lived for 20 years with a very tortured and tormented mind and brain. And when he was in periods where he might be doing somewhat better, he was funny and creative and loving and loved his nieces and nephews and kind and compassionate, had a real heart for children who had struggled with abuse or been trafficked. I mean, he just had a very, very tender heart. He knew when other people hurt and he hurt with them. And yet for him, really, the madness just became unbearable until he hit that wall of mental illness for the last time. And he took his life on April 5th, 2013. And very much as Sharon said, people kept telling me that I would survive, that I would live through it. And then I can just remember the times that I would think, but do I want to? You know, maybe I will, but I'm not sure that I want to, because I can't imagine living the rest of my life without my son. And slowly for 4 months, my husband's a pastor. For 4 months, we didn't go to church. We barely left the house. A good day was to get up, brush my teeth. You know, I had a friend the first week who basically just fed me challah bread and a tea, because food was nauseating, and, you know, just all of those things that many of you could tell a similar story. And as I began to slowly, as the fog began to emerge just a tiny bit, that question that Jackie asked, you know, what kept you going? What got you through the earliest days and months and even years? And for me, it like Sharon, theology, as much as I was absolutely mystified that God would allow my son to die in such a violent way, which we can talk about later if you want to, but just, I wasn't necessarily angry. I was just, I think, so hurt, because God was my friend. And we had begged and pleaded and prayed and done everything we knew to do. And yet our son died in a terrible way. And I just didn't know what to do with all of that. But what kind of kept me going was just this sense of my family had already lost so much, that this beautiful, incredible person had been taken from our family, and I didn't want them to lose anymore. I didn't want them to lose me. I didn't want them to lose me. I didn't want to get lost in the grief. So that I'll never forget standing with a mother and a young adult daughter who were telling their grief story, and the daughter sobbing, saying, I didn't just lose my brother, I lost my mother. My mother died basically when he did. And the mother wailed, saying, but I can't help it. I can't help it. You don't know what it's like. I can't help it. And the daughter saying, Mama, I know, but Mama, I've lost you. And I just thought, I don't want that to happen to my surviving kids, to my grandkids, to my husband, to my friends, to the other people that God will use me in somehow in this life. I didn't want my family to lose anymore by losing me. And so that became something I could hold on to as I was moving through grief, was to kind of keep that partially in my mind. Not that I was trying to live for them. I just thought we'd lost so much. I just didn't want to give up any more ground, in our family.
The deep love that a mother has for her family. You just want to scoop them up and just tell them it's going to be okay. And that's a huge reason for me to get out of bed. And plus Noah and Jack and Marseille living in my home, that I didn't have a choice. They come pounding on the door. So yeah, that's a good reason. Well, thank you for sharing that, Kate. To both of my friends here, in their books, and I told Sharon, I'm like, gotta order the hard copy because I have hers on my Kindle, but in Kay's book, Choose Joy, I was looking in here and I've underlined so many things, and they both talk about a part of their reliance. So page 1 through 9, Kay says, happiness requires no effort on our part, but joy results from our deliberate choices to think differently, act differently, and feel differently. Happiness comes unbidden and unexpectedly and can leave just as abruptly. Joy can be available anytime, anywhere, any place, but it is a result of our decision to choose it. That's why it's called, of course, Choose Joy. And I'll have you share, if you don't mind, Kay, about the necklace and that day. And then in Sharon's book, Treasures in Darkness, says, casting the burden of our sorrow onto the strong shoulders of our Heavenly Father lightens our load, making room for joy to seep in. Such surrender is not an over and done with decision. It is a long, hard process that must be repeated again and again, because every day your heart will discover a new reason for grieving. So true. So true. Both of these, like, amazing to go through. And the one thing that I will say is that, I didn't realize, Kay, until, of course, a while ago, it's been a while, but when you wrote the book, I was like, that was before. That was before. Do you feel comfortable sharing that moment?
Yeah, I wrote Choose Joy. It came out a year before Matthew died, because his struggle was so intense that I basically wasn't sure that I could survive years more of his illness. This chair that's actually behind me is really significant. It was a burgundy printed velvet thing that I have for years. I called it my worry chair. And that was the chair that I sat in for years when I couldn't sleep with Matthew's illness. And we didn't know if he was alive, because we hadn't heard from him. And was he making an attempt? It was just torture for us as well. And that was my worry chair. And then after he died, I had it for a little while and thought, I can't have this in my house. I can't have this in my house. And so it was out of my house for a while. And then I had it recovered in the most exuberant turquoise, kind of velvet and leather. And now it's my chair where I have my quiet time, and I still wrestle with God, but I'm wrestling from a little bit different place. But I even put it out of my house again a couple years ago, because it felt like I was done. I could release it. It belonged to my past. And it had been a place where I met God, both in worry and anxiety and in deep grief. But then about 6 months ago, I decided I wanted it back. And so this chair may go in and out of my house through my life. I don't know. It just, now it is a warm, comforting place where I feel God's presence, but it has held tears and anxiety. So Choose Joy was written in that period before Matthew died, when I was thinking, I don't know how to survive. If he should die, I don't know how I'll make it. I have to have something. I've got to have something, because joy is not a part of my makeup, and I'm not an optimist. I'm a realist, I call it. But I'm not. So I just knew I had to shore up spiritually, my faith, or I was afraid I would go down with the ship if something were to ever happen to him.
Can I ask you a question, Kay?
Absolutely.
The title is Choose Joy, and I'm going to get it. I haven't read it yet, but
I'll send it to you.
Oh, thank you. Choose Joy. Tell us what that looks like. What has that looked like for you over the years, where you recognized there was something, there's a disconnect, and you were making room for joy? What does that look like?
Thanks. That's a great question. It really came out of James 1, which I had grown up hearing my whole life. Basically, it's wonderful, quote, it's wonderful when your faith is exposed to the fire, and, in that circumstance, basically choose joy. And I don't know, it rang kind of hollow with me. And then when I read it in a different translation, and it was, your faith life is exposed when we go through hard times. And that was sobering to me, because you can go through all kinds of hard times. You've all lost children, but you've also gone through some other times in your life that were very difficult, very hard and painful. And to know that our faith life is it's like it's putting your faith like out on your front porch. It's one thing where we think we're living our faith within, the closed doors of our home, but actually troubles actually put our faith like out on the front porch. And everybody can then see, and you see the holes, and you see the places where you thought you were stronger or you believed differently. And all of a sudden you're kind of going, wow, I don't know that I'm as strong and whatever in the Lord as I thought I was. And so in my search for trying to understand what that could possibly mean, I realized that I had bought into the kind of the Hallmark card variety of what joy was, that it was, happiness and the beautiful sunsets, and, everything is going well in your life. And nothing was going well in my life. And yet I was still reading that joy could be a part of my existence. And I came to understand that it is so much more about the eternal, not the external. And that when we redefine joy, it has to be a complete redefinition of joy, that it has nothing to do really with what's going on in our lives. It has nothing to do with the circumstances, because the circumstances can change in a heartbeat, as many of you would say. That's happened to us. Our whole lives changed in a moment. Some of you, your loss took months, as your child was ill, but there came a moment in which it all shifted. And so everything is temporary here. And if I could only be joyful, if all the circumstances of my life lined up in this certain way, then I was going to spend an awful lot of my life without joy. And redefining it into understanding that it's connecting the internal to the eternal, so that the external does not have the ability to tank me, is really what my discovery was in a nutshell. It's connecting what's inside of me, my spirit that is eternal, connect it to God, who cannot change, who cannot be taken away, who cannot leave me, divorce me, abandon me, turn his back on me. Connect that to him. Then when everything else around me shifts, as it will and has and will continue to do, then that connection to him allows there to be a kind of settled sense of well-being and shalom and joy that will carry me through. And that's kind of my book. You don't need to
That's
read it.
pretty,
Just
that's
said it
pretty
all.
powerful, pretty powerful. Like, wow. Like, I'm glad that I'm recording it so I could like take all those nuggets back. That was really good. Really good. Well, it's interesting when I reached out to Kay and I said, we're starting off session 2 with Jeremiah 17, 7 through 8. And she said, oh, well, that just happens to be one of my life verses. So, yeah, I just, a well-watered tree has the strength in times of crisis. It doesn't fear when the heat comes. And I just love that scripture. I'm sure that everybody could have a different meaning behind that and a connection to it. What was your connection with that scripture, Kay, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, you know what? It's actually, I have to go back 2 verses to kind of, for me to set it up the why it was so powerful to me, because the 2 verses before that says, cursed or unhappy. And I'm going to change it just a tiny bit because this is the way that it hit me when I first read it. Cursed or unhappy is the woman who puts her trust in mere humans and turns her heart away from the Lord. She will be like a stunted shrub in the desert with no hope for the future. She will live in the barren wilderness on the salty flats where no one lives. But blessed, happy is the woman whose trust is in the Lord, and she has made the Lord her hope and confidence. She will be like a tree planted along a riverbank with roots that reach deep into the water. Such trees are not bothered by the heat or worried by long months of drought. Her leaves will stay green, and she will go right on producing delicious fruit. So, as somebody who had spent a lot of my life feeling very insecure, not very confident in myself, worried, honestly, that if something were to, here was my husband, a pastor of this big church. He had a certain amount of recognition in the world. And my fear, I realized one day, was what if something happens to him? Will I still matter? Will my value, my worth, my contribution in this world even matter? Do I only matter because I'm attached to this man who is very confident and I am very not confident? And the Lord took me to this passage, and I realized that I was pretty much like the person in the first part of those 2 verses. I was like a stunted shrub. I didn't have enough roots on my own. And I was going to be like, when winds of adversity or pain or heartache or trouble came, I was going to be like a tumbleweed, just kind of blown. Nothing was going to hold me. And therefore I had reason to feel insecure because my husband could leave me. My husband could become incapacitated and need me and not be this strong person. He could die. I mean, he could leave me for somebody else. There were if he was my security, I had nothing. But then to realize that God set up a different picture of how my life could be, which was if I intentionally put my trust and deliberately sent my spiritual roots down into the goodness and the character of God, then even if, and at that time it was about what if something happened to my husband. So even if something happened to my husband, I could still be like a tree planted by the waters. And then it became even more true as I wondered, what if something happens to my son? What if Matthew makes good on all of his threats? What if he actually takes his life? How will I be able to survive? Will I just be like that tumbleweed? And so it pushed me to keep intentionally sending my spiritual roots deep into the goodness of God, so that when Matthew died, what I've said is it's like the tree of my faith was shaken. It's like everything bad and evil and wrong and terrible and traumatic in this world like took the tree of my faith and just shook it for all it was worth. And I can say that the roots held. Does not mean that it was easy peasy and that I'm sitting here telling you if you just trust God everything will be wonderful. I am not telling you that. What I'm telling you though, is that it is never too late to send your spiritual roots. Everybody tries it when tragedy happens. It's hard to put those spiritual roots down when you're just feeling like you're going to die. So it's like, do it now. It's never too late. It doesn't matter where you are in your life to go ahead and just keep putting your roots down into the goodness of God. Because what I felt like the enemy wanted to shake from me was the belief that God was good. Because if I couldn't get past the fact that, if I couldn't get past that accusation of God isn't really good, if I couldn't get through that challenge to my faith, then the tree would probably topple. And so the intentionality that I tried to put in before those things happened, and that I continue to do on a daily basis now, that doesn't mean I don't have a lot of unanswered questions. You guys, back the here. These are essential to my faith. So I have a hope box, and it had all the verses that I had where I believed God was going to heal Matthew. Full of verses. Everybody I talked to, do you have a verse? If you have a verse, I'm going to put that verse in my hope box. And as I sat in my worry chair and I would open my hope box and I would read those verses and those verses and those verses, and I would hold on to those verses and I would cling to those verses and I would believe those verses and I would quote those verses, and my confidence was in those verses. And Matthew died. And yet I've got this box that says hope, and it just felt like it mocked me. You know, hope. How ridiculous. He's dead. And so a month or so after Matthew died, I just took all those verses out, took them out of here, because they're true, but they weren't true for me. They weren't true for him. In other words, what I expected to happen is not what happened. And I thought I threw them away, but a couple years ago, I actually found them in a drawer wrapped in paper. I had somehow stuck them as far back in a drawer as I could, but I couldn't live without hope. And so a friend heard me questioning and just crying out to God of, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this. And she knows I'm very tangible and I like tangible things. So she bought me this little Le Creuset cassolette, and this became my mystery pot. And in it, on little tiny strips of paper, are all the questions that I have no answers for. I just pulled this one out randomly. What good were my prayers of faith? And there's others. And what I realized gradually was that I don't have to be able to answer all of the questions about the whys, the how comes, where was God, why didn't he cause, why didn't you stop him, God? I don't have answers for those things. I don't have answers for those things, but they're worth asking. But what I do, I began then to repopulate my hope box with verses that I could believe and hold on to. And the very first one was 1 Corinthians 15:43. And I say this every time I go to the cemetery. Our bodies are buried in brokenness, but they will be raised in glory. They are buried in weakness, but they will be raised in strength. And as I've wept at my son's grave and spoken that out loud, Matthew, your body was buried in brokenness. You broke your body, but it will be raised in glory. You were buried in weakness, my son, but you will be raised in strength. And other verses like that rebuilt my hope. And you saw, you guys, I have hope and mystery. And they sit right next to each other, because I don't think that you can have a robust faith to be able to make it through these terrible losses that don't make sense.
Yeah.
If you don't have hope with mystery. If you just have mystery, you'll walk away. You will walk away. And if you have hope that doesn't acknowledge there are things that you don't have good answers for, you'll just be a little Pollyanna, and your faith will not be very strong. But when you have hope and know that there are mysteries that will only be solved someday in the presence of God, and I'm content now to wait. I'm content now to wait. I'm not always happy about it, but I'm content to wait for those things. I'm talking too long. I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
But-
No, no. No, that's so good. I didn't realize, and do you still have those hope boxes still on your website? Those, you can get one of those hope boxes on our website. I didn't know you had the mystery one, but I
And I
love
have the
that.
little mystery pots there too.
Yeah, that one's great. Thank you
It's-
for sharing that.
But just one thing I would say, you can be frustrated with God, you can be mad at God, you can say, God, I don't get you, this doesn't make sense, you can feel estranged. But here's the thing, because you know how like when a toddler is just having a fit, I mean just having a fit, and if you can get close enough eventually to just kind of put them within the circle of your arms and kind of just shush them and just kind of hold them close, that pretty soon most kids they'll just wear themselves out, and then they kind of collapse in the safety of your arms and let you love them and shush them and comfort them. I visualize myself in the embrace of God, and I am having a fit, and I am kicking and screaming and yelling and cussing and accusing and all of those things, and within the safety of God's embrace, you can have all the fits you need to have and know that you are safe in his arms, and he will not ever remove those arms. And there will be those moments then where you can receive his comfort, and there comes the peace until it rises again, and you need to have that in the circle of his embrace.
And the scripture in Jeremiah just validates so much. I mean, there's so many things in scripture, but to say that people are going to disappoint you and circumstances are not going to turn out the way that you wanted them to, and just so many things. But yet when those storms come and the waters rise and your faith is just grounded next to that living water like that, it just really, I mean, because I have had people in my life that, yeah, not putting them on a pedestal, but just like, wow, but wait a minute, they love Jesus. How is it possible they did that? Or my son, Randy, who was such a godly man who loved him and had such an amazing marriage, with Marseille. And I looked up to that and I was coveting their marriage. And then all of a sudden this happens. And then it's like, if my faith completely relied on those circumstances, those people, I wouldn't be here today either. And so it is like I told them last week, was that it is our responsibility to deepen our roots into that soil, that living water, because it's not going to come easily. It's going to be so easy for that to be disrupted by circumstances and people saying, well, I'm not a Christian because all these people in the Christian faith are this and that. And I'm like, yeah, but you're looking and focusing at people. Don't use that as your excuse about your bad experiences. You got to look to the Savior, and that's it. Especially us, especially all of us women that have got this yearning for these children, no matter how long it has been. And I will have to say to, Sharon and JK, is like, we know all these women that are here. I applaud, including, you guys, for saying, you know what, I want to get to know him better. I know that I've got a purpose to be able to share this testimony and to bring others to Jesus, because instead of darting people in the grocery store, I'm going to have that conversation with them. And speaking of which, Kay, and because we've got you for this one time, you're going to be needing to drink a lot of water and everything when you're doing, because you're going to be doing most talking. But to talk about that day that you had, how many years ago has it been now? Going back to Rancho Capistrano and having to go in and speak and share. And I know that it wasn't your ideal circumstances, but how God used that in such a way, because I have to say, if you get a chance to watch it, because Kay was so raw and real. And that's what I have admired about you, because you just call it as it is. I mean, getting to know you over these last so many years, it's like you're never going to sugarcoat anything. And I'm just going to tell this really quick. When I had her out at the ranch in California and we're sitting there and I said something about, I want to ask you to do something. And she looked straight in my eye and she said, I'm not getting on a horse. I had all these horses there. Like she is just, nope, not going to do it. And yeah, I failed to get her on a horse, but nonetheless, that's what I love about her. But let's revisit that, Kay, when you were driving down to the church and you thought, I'll let you finish that.
Well, Saddleback has several campuses, and one of them is in, if you're local to California, it's Rancho Capistrano. It was about 15 miles from my home. And that's where we had Matthew's service in the worship center there on that campus. And they have other buildings, and I had been to other events on the campus in the 5 years. So this happened 5 years ago. So it was at the 5-year mark, and I had not been back there in 5 years. I had not been into the building where we had his service. I had no interest, too traumatic, just didn't want to be there. And, but I'd been to other events at the campus, and I'd been asked to speak at a grief event at a Christmas grief share thing. And so I just hadn't been paying attention. I was kind of busy. I'm going over my notes. My assistant was driving me, and we pull onto the campus. I'm still not thinking of anything. I'm thinking we're going to this other part of the campus. And all of a sudden I look up as she's pulling in right in front of the worship center. And I was late. I mean, I was going to be late. I had a very tiny margin. There was no time to really process or think. And it all came back. That's the door I went in 5 years ago for his service. I cannot get out of this car, let alone go speak to a couple hundred people who want me to say something meaningful to them about grief and Christmas. And I was an absolute mess. I was completely traumatized, completely immobilized. My poor assistant was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you knew. I'm so sorry. I didn't." And I'm like, "No, I did not know. I didn't pay attention. I didn't know. I can't do this. I've got to leave. I can't be." I mean, all of you've ever been in that situation where you're thinking, I have to get out of here right now. And yet I knew very clearly there were 200 people sitting in that building waiting in deep grief, who needed to have the comfort of God in that moment. And I had been tasked with doing that. And it was just kind of like I felt like I had no choice. But I was weeping, and there wasn't like there was a whole big program. It was just basically me. So I didn't even have time to pull myself together. It was more like, they did this and they did 5 minutes of stuff. And it's like, and here's Kay Warren. And all I could do was stumble up to that stage and wept my way through it all. It was very difficult. But as Jackie said, somehow God used my being completely undone to give other people in that room permission to be completely undone. Nobody had to pretend that they were okay or that it was all right, or, they were going to power through this thing. It was, no, we were all kind of undone together. And again, as I said, very much so to the way that I feel just being with you tonight, that sense of we are grieving together. And there's so few places in the world that you can literally just grieve and not have to be embarrassed or ashamed or make apologies, or I'm sorry, I'm crying. I'm sorry, I can't get myself to. No, it was just a bunch of undone people who were mourning, missing, aching, wishing things had been different, and but together somehow, as our tears and snot and everything else all mingled, I walked away comforted. I walked away deeply grieving, but also feeling not alone. And that's powerful.
You met everybody right where they were when you walked in. And you're right. You gave us all permission to say it's okay, because it wasn't like some woman that was going to stand up there and tell you how it's done. You know, it's just like, you know what, I don't have it all figured out either. And that's what was just so magnificent. Like that was an example of relying completely on his strength and not on your own, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a very heavy but beautiful evening. And I will never, ever forget that, Kay. Yeah, I'm sure you were drained when you were
Well, you may remember it even clearer than I do, because I was in trauma. You know, standing there, I was traumatized, and yet was doing what I needed to do. So, you know, sometimes with trauma, you don't even remember all of everything you did or said or anything. So there may be parts of it you remember even more than I do. I was a walking trauma at that moment.
No, we think that we're a mess, but it's almost like you were completely just led by the Holy Spirit, and you composed yourself just enough. And yeah, I sent the link to some of them. Is your website still kwarren.com, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of you guys were asking about her website. So when we're talking about, you know, let's get into a couple of these points here. Better as back when we had the awareness fair, when the mountain lion attack happened, I had this motto called it's better to be prepared and not scared, talking about going into the wilderness. And but now we're talking about just any time to trust in the Lord as that tree grows by the calming streams. So time together as a family, discussing the inevitable, reduce the anticipatory anxiety, as well as keep the peace with them. Begin and end meetings in prayer, and don't enter with expectations. So I know there's a lot of pointers, and Sharon, you can jump in on any of these too, but I remember so vividly that I don't know if it was just you and I talking or not, but I think it was when you were talking about people sending Christmas cards and how you guys both felt, you know, that first year. And if you had meetings with your family, and like, because everybody's grieving in a different way, and were they doing things just to please mom and dad to be able to make it through the holidays? Because oftentimes the other siblings, if there are, you know, just kind of get pushed aside, not intentionally, but everybody's focus is on mom and dad. So if you, Sharon, you or Kay, want to speak to how you guys work that with family, and did you like Kay will just say, nope, all those cards and letters people sent, nope.
Karen, you go ahead. I'll chime in after you do.
Well, that first Christmas, I mean, even the night of Mark's death, my husband reached over and said, as we were driving home from the hospital, Christmas, what are we going to do about Christmas? Because the holidays were just the highlight for us. Between our church family and our family traditions, our roots were very deep in both of our family traditions, and we always tried to celebrate with both families. You know, we had been married for 25 years, and we were still trying to do 2 Thanksgiving dinners and 2 Christmases, actually 3. And we knew that wasn't going to work for us that year. And one of our friends said that dreading the holidays is often worse than experiencing the holidays. And I think that can be true. You're dreading up to that moment, holidays and birthdays and special times. And we were just dreading it. And so we talked as a family that we wanted to continue some of our traditions, but we wanted to end some of them as well. And so we changed. We had always had a buffet, Christmas buffet at our house on Christmas Eve with friends, who then we went to church together for the Christmas Eve service. And we were going to cancel that until some friends said that they would be happy to do it for us in our home. And somehow that was a comfort to us to have our close friends and family together. We went to the Christmas Eve service, as we had always done. Lots of tears, but hugs. But for us, it was good to be with people who loved Mark and knew Mark. The next day, we did not go to our parents' homes for Christmas. We knew that we needed to just process and take some time. We knew that Christmas was not going to be the same. And we knew that those were our needs. And we kind of we made those decisions as a family. But there were things that I wanted to do for our family, somehow to keep Mark as part of our family tradition. And so several days before Christmas, we had a family dinner, and I had special gifts for each of them, things that, like my husband, I had found a letter that Mark had written to my husband. I had it framed and gave that to him, and special pictures for each of the children. We had Mark's favorite foods. For us, that worked. That was a good thing. But I know that for other families, that would not be a good thing. Other families might say, I can't stay here in this house. I need to leave. I need to go away. The thing that I try to share with people who are trying to make these decisions is you make decisions that are right for your family. Your heart is still going to be breaking. That doesn't mean you made a wrong decision. It's just the decision you have to make that's best for you, and to be fluid with those decisions as you're making them, that you can change on a dime. You could be getting ready to go to an event. A friend could be there with you to make sure that you're not going to be by yourself. And at the last minute, you say, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. Our Christmas, our women's ministry always had a Christmas tea, Christmas event. And the day of it, I was supposed to participate. And it was 6 months after Mark's death. And I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. And a friend heard, a close friend, realized I wasn't there, and she came and sat with me. And, even as 30 years later, I think about those times, and friends, they're so hard. But there are treasures that God has for us in those hard places, as we talked about last week. And so I agree with Jackie, is to talk with your family. Everybody's on a different page. If you have children, they might say, we want to have Christmas. And you have to find a compromise for them. But I think it's better to talk about it earlier rather than later.
Yeah. Don't want to kind of avoid the anticipatory anxiety. Like we're saying, most of it is so much more of preparing and knowing it's coming. And that's why we're doing this for the month of November, so that you can be prepared to not only have, some more tools, but mostly, again, to just change up that relationship with Jesus. Just, again, I challenging you guys to really deepen it. What is that going to look like? And as I shared, it was when I was just at Saddleback Church, when I was back in California. And as I was telling Kay, just having that moment of like worship 7 years ago to this day, and looking over where I was sitting and to where I was sitting 7 years later. And when I sat there and my arms just went up and in worship, it was the first, it's like, I'm almost embarrassed to say, but it was the first worship, like it could make me cry, that I felt like, wow, they were baptizing, and it was just so absolutely, it was a gift from God to have that moment to where, I put my hands up, but it wasn't just like this, ta-da moment, but it just went down to my soul. And I was so thankful, because in that chair on the other side of the church, I never imagined that I would be where I'm at, and that I would have such amazing friends, not by choice, right? I love you guys, but it's not how I'd want my friends, but that I would be surrounded by such courageous, amazing women that are not catty, they're not gossipy, they have been in the trenches, and to get in the trenches with the Lord. And if you haven't yet, do it, you guys. And like we said last week, give your pain a name. Identify that by writing it. What is it that's blocking this flow, as I say, like of the Holy Spirit to come and just go through your entire being, to allow you to experience the full depth of his love, because you're still breathing. You're still breathing. And we always say, when we thought about the loss, a parent's worst nightmare, losing a child. And I will never survive that. No, that can only happen to other people. And here we are. And why are we here? Because of the grace of God. Because there's a lot of people I know that don't have a relationship with God, and they're not doing so well. So I'm so grateful that many years ago, back in 1996, that I went to the big Harvest Crusade and really met Jesus and got to know him. But it, again, is that sanctification that happens over time. It's not all going to happen at once. And it, again, it is our responsibility to dig deep and to find and know this man that loves us more than we loved our children, which is so hard to believe. How is it that somebody could love us that much, especially that we sin every single day, and yet he will hold his arms out? In fact, my example was when I took the dogs out. Did I tell you guys this last week? When I took the dogs to the dog park and Juno got separated from me, and he's always like right there. And the whole place is fenced, so I wasn't worried. But it was like, I ran into these people that knew full well who my dogs were. They're pretty well known in the park because they sing to everybody. And they said, "Are you looking for Juno?" And I was like, "Yeah, but oh no, he's sitting right there by your bike. Like, he's sitting right next to your bike." And I said, "Oh my gosh, that's where." I looked over and there he was. And the minute that he saw me, he came running toward me, and just imagining like God just like there to receive, like "You're my person, I love you so much, don't ever leave me." I mean, that's how Jesus feels about us. He loves us so much. He never wants us to be separated from him. He knows we're going to go off the path like Juno did the other day, but it was like just to always come back to him, because he'll wait. He will definitely wait. Hi, Lisa D. By the way, our other long distance friend, but it's not an ungodly time, is Diane. She's in Australia, right below Rosie there. So she's far away too. Okay, let's get back to.
Can I just say one quick thing to piggyback on what both of you were saying? And
of course,
I would just echo very similar experiences that Sharon expressed. But for me, where I've kind of condensed it is just, and maybe Jackie said this before, you've heard this, but it's been a guiding principle for me through grief, is when you can, you will. Because there are so many things you don't know. You haven't been down this road before, and you will come up to an experience, especially maybe in the holidays. And like she was saying, Jackie and Sharon were both saying, some people will decorate because that's what you can't imagine not doing, even though you're like, "I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this because this is what we do in this family." And some of you will go, "Well, we'll do a little bit because I don't think I can do everything." And some of you will go, "No, I can't do that right now." And what happens is we start to feel shame if there's something that we try or we say, "I can't do that." I just feel like then you have shame on top of grief, like, "Oh, I'm so weak," or "I'm a baby," or, "What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Other people are doing this. Why can't I do this?" And that just compounds the grief that you're feeling. And just be so gentle with yourself. And I really believe when you can, you will. And I gave you a Christmas tree, decorating experience. I know, like Jackie, the first anniversary, I think, of Randy's death. Didn't you guys go to Disneyland or something?
we went to Knott's Berry Farm. Yeah.
Knott's Berry Farm. And I'm like, there is no way in the wide world I could have done that on Matthew's first anniversary. But it is this perfect illustration of what one is good. It's a good choice for one family, and it's exactly right. It took years before I could go back, but when you can, you will. And so don't feel ashamed. Don't feel badly about yourself. Try it. Okay, try something. And if you go, "Oh, I can't do this too soon," no shame, no guilt. Just try it again in 6 months, or try it again next year. And at some point, it will likely shift, and you will be able to do whatever XYZ is, from small to really big. But just no shame, no guilt. When you can, you will. Give that same grace to everybody else in your family, because as Sharon said, they're on their own path. But yeah, do not let shame creep in, as well as this terrible sadness that you're already having to live with.
Well, like you said too, being gentle, that's such a beautiful word. is to be gentle with yourself. And I think one time I had said something about like, yeah, I love to go mountain biking. And you were like, can't you just go sit and stretch? Isn't that more comforting for you? Like that's a lot to go mountain biking, right?
But it soothed you. It made you, it soothed you. It made you feel better. It was what you needed to do. And that's good.
Yes.
It's
Well, and
good.
I'm so grateful to have gotten you out there to do a hike out at Whiting Ranch.
You about killed me.
What side is it that you don't like to walk on?
I have to walk on your left.
That's right.
If I walk on your right, I'll walk into you.
And so what did I do the whole time?
Tease me and try to walk on the other side.
Anyway, yeah, it's like, I mean, it just goes to show the differences in people, and you know what works for Kay might not work for me or whatever, any way around. But that's the whole thing. You can't really judge anybody, especially even in your own family. You know, for us, it was like we had young kids, so going to Knott's Berry Farm just seemed to be a win for everybody, you know, and it was distracting and yeah, and I think Randy would have probably, that's what we did too, is we thought, what would Randy want us to be doing right now? You know, what would Matthew want us to be doing? You know, what would Mark want to be doing, and all of your other kids? Yeah, I do quote that all the time, Kay. When you can, you will. And I'm always quoting that from the ladies. That was like something special in the very beginning. Anybody have can open it up with if there's been an aha moment from last week at all that you guys would like to share, you know, quickly so we can get to everybody. Or is there a question maybe that you have for Sharon or Kay? They're so shy. Last week they were so shy. Okay. You're going to be like, don't should on yourself, but you are going to say, I should have said something. Okay. Rosie, look at Rosie's like should be half asleep and she's got a question.
Yeah, it's not really a question, but just to take the opportunity, Kay, we've a mutual friend, Janice Flynn. So we lost our son, David, just over 4 years ago. But before that, and still continuing, we have a daughter, Christina, with terrible mental health problems. And Janice initially pointed to you and Rick in terms of your struggles with mental health. And I have been and continue to be so grateful for what you do. I wish I could come to your retreats and maybe one day. But then when David died, it was shortly after that. You must have been talking with Jackie on a podcast. And again, Janice sent me a link and said, you should listen to this. And that's what got me in touch with Jackie. So I'm just so, there was something about what you said. I thought, I think you were talking about just a mother's grief is different. It's just different. And it is. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful to you. Hope to meet you one day, but yeah, just to get the opportunity to say it to your face. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. It means a lot to me. Thanks.
Janice, I just saw Janice last week. Do you remember Janice? She was the lady in the front desk there.
Yeah.
She's from Ireland. Okay, I just ran into her last week. That's Rosie's friend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Susie raised her hand. Where are you, Susie? Right there. You can't hear you. I still can't hear you. And I don't read lips.
I think she's going to try to fix it.
Okay.
Sorry. Can you put it in the chat?
Yeah. While she's figuring it out, does anybody else have a question or something they'd like to share? Diane.
Hi everyone. I was just to second what Rosie said, just to say thank you all the way from Australia. I had I had not had an opportunity to grieve with others. And I too was watching regularly Kay Saddleback, and I saw you and Jackie do your podcast, and that's what led me to Jackie. So I second what Rosie said. Thank you for the ministry of both of you for connecting me. And now I have all these beautiful sisters that I can now share with, and it's just beautiful. Thank you, both of you.
Yeah. Thank you, Diane.
Yeah, she's had like really no support down in Australia at all, and so we're trying to get things started. So Susie's saying, so sorry, thank you for all you do and how the Lord shines through you, sending you all my love and praying for your heart. We'll still try to fix my sound. Okay.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you.
Here we get out of that.
Technology.
Yeah. When it works, it's great, isn't it?
It's pleasant.
Yeah, we did a video, or we did a Facebook Live a few years back, and that's what I think that they're referring to. So look at what God did with that, and it really has reached out to quite a few people. So that's amazing. So another point I wanted to say is guilt is another big reason why we end up doing things. And so what I want to say to you guys is, this Christmas time, there's going to be, oh, Carol gets you, sweetie. There's going to be a lot of invitations. There's going to be a lot of expectations of other people because they really just want to see you, and they may come across a little bit curt as far as like, well, why aren't you going to be there? Why weren't you there? So don't do things based on guilt. Do things based on your time alone with God and how, you feel at peace in your heart and contentment, because nobody should be guilting you as far as making you do anything or having expectations. And again, it's just really because they want to see you be yourself again. They want to see you participate, and they want to be the one maybe to bring some joy into your life, but nobody can do that. It's your own journey that you have to have that as you walk in with the Lord. Carol, sweet Carol.
Hi, everybody. Kay, I've lost 3 sons, and my oldest and youngest both suffered from depression, which led to addiction, which led to overdose. My oldest in 2012, my youngest in 2019. But our 4th son, Ben, we lost him in 2021. He was identified very early with mental illness, suffered trauma, bipolar disorder. And just when you talk about your son, the torture that they lived with, I lived with that with him. And I think it's important just to realize that we watched our children slowly die because they just never could get past the mental illness. They might have had short periods of time when they rose above it and they could see a little more clearly and God could speak to them a little more clearly. But it's a very exhausting journey, and I really appreciate. I've listened to a lot of your YouTube videos, and I watched the Christmas one a couple of times, and just my heart just really does resonate with the way you speak, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you, Carol. So sorry for the losses. There's just no way there are no good words that I can say other than if you were standing here, we'd just hug and cry together.
Yes. And it's only by the grace of God that I get up every morning.
Yeah.
He's good. Even though I don't understand it. And you're right, the mysteries, you don't understand it, but I don't have to, because he's been faithful. So that's what I hold on to. So thank you.
Thank you, sister.
Katrina, I'm gonna call on you here in a minute. I wanted to say that Carol is, and not just because she's lost 3 sons, but Carol was at the retreat on the East Coast, and she is a very solid lady in her relationship with Christ. And Lord's putting it on her heart to lead a group potentially for moms that have lost multiple children. In fact, there was a couple today. I don't know if Stacey reached out to you or not, Carol, but we got on the comments. It is amazing when you put on Facebook and say, name your child. The moms want to see their children's name, and they called it their sunrise date and their sunset date. And there was probably close to 7,000 that were on there. And it was just like, I mean, it was like humbling to look at all of those names of those kids. It was just heartfelt. But so I'm so grateful that God has put this group together for all of us, and the friendships that are developing. It's just unbelievable. So thank you for sharing that, Carol. Katrina.
I was going to say, I really resonated with when you were talking about the unanswered questions, because I think after Claire passed, you have all of these millions of questions that go through your brain, and then everyone's asking you questions, and some of them you're like, I don't know the answer to those. Like, I wish I did, but I don't. But then also, I think coming to terms with the fact that sometimes you don't need to know the answers to those things. But I never thought about it in the perspective of like, one day I will get those answers, and that's when we're all together, up in heaven. And maybe he won't answer all of them then either. I don't know, but at least I'll get answers to most of them. But that just kind of touched me in a way, just because still you get in the head of the spindrift thoughts, I guess you could say, and those questions just start coming back up. So
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
And Katrina's leading a group for moms that have lost young children because she lost her beautiful daughter, Claire, and she calls it Claire's group. So there's another blessing out of that. And I think that, Lynn, where are you, Lynn? You raised your hand. Where'd she go? Are you still there, Lynn? I'm not seeing her. Well, if you are, I'll come back to you, sweetie. All right, Susie, did you have your hand raised up again?
Now my dogs are barking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me now that the dogs are barking. I'm so sorry. Perfect timing. Of course, I want to share with you. 1 second. Do you want to go get somebody else first, Jackie? Since
No,
what
is your dog's name again?
Lola. Lola's the Chihuahua. Somebody's just ringing the
Lola,
doorbell. I'm so sorry. Shush, Lola. Lola. So sorry. Sorry. That was not planned. They were sleeping the whole time. Okay, you can't hear him. Okay, good. Can you hear me okay though?
Yes.
No? Okay. So I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you shared. There's a couple things that constantly resonate with me, which is that you were talking, I think it was a Mother's Day talk where you were talking about having joy and grief. You can have both at the same time. And it's just so true that we don't have to be, in bondage to that all the time. When you can, you will. But I just wanted to say, I look at these faces. We all have such a story when we lean into the Lord, that when we lean in and let the Lord use our pain for a purpose, we just see such beauty in that. And that's just that choosing the joy, seeing the Lord working in the circumstances, in every circumstance, the multiple losses, the grief, multiple children, husbands. I mean, we've all suffered greatly, and our friendships are so deep and connected, and we wouldn't be here if you hadn't chosen to share. I wouldn't be here if Jackie, I look at Sherilyn, there's just people here. We wouldn't be here if we didn't choose to lean into the Lord. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who does that. Thank you, Kay. And thank you for being patient with my dogs. I'm so sorry.
Amen,
Thank
Susie.
you,
Yes. Susie just recently lost her husband too. We have another woman in the group that just recently lost a husband too. And so there's compiled, grieving. But we are so, like so many of these women in here, it's like, we're so like solid, and they live all these different places. Lynn, you are back. So did you have a question? Well, you have the stage, so you better just come up with one.
Trying.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. I'm a technological mess. My battery, I went dead, my phone, even though I charged it. So, well, I do have a question about grief. Like I'm finding that any of the grief that I have after the loss of my son seems amplified. Like I just lost my mother, and it almost just brings up the grief of losing my son all over again. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that.
I think you see a lot of nodding heads because absolutely.
Mhm.
You're not weird.
Thank you. Well, I am weird, but thank you.
But not for that reason.
I know what you mean. Thank you.
I think that's a really common. I think that's just the nature of the way we're wired. That one grief reopens doors to other griefs. I think that's very normal, painful, but normal.
Right. Like I think I'm at a certain point with my son's grief, and then when that happens, it does just, like you said, it's kind of like a trigger.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Our hearts are tender places.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that they're just always going to be forever very tender. But the one thing that we all have learned so much is how much empathy that we have and compassion for one another. And, we can just look at each other and not even have to say anything. We just get it. And we don't want anybody else to understand how we feel. Well, we are getting close to our time of coming to a close. And so what are you guys going to do between now and the rest of this month that we have together? Has anybody come up with like a prayer time or something that they feel? Let's just do this by raise a hand. Who is just on fire to just get to know Jesus a lot better and have Christmas be completely different? Feeling a lot stronger, feeling a lot more of just being, like I said, an ambassador for him. And some of you may be just like, Jackie, there's just no way, no how, it's just not going to happen. But what I want to point out is that you are here. And if you're here, that just tells me that you've got the desire to want to do that. Am I right? So who genuinely wants to get to know him better and make this true difference, not just for, we're talking about like people around us, but how about within our families? I'll just say, like my sons, they know Jesus and I know they accepted him, and, but the family dynamics are so different. We talked about, the chain and how at the top of the chain is like a parent, like Lynn just lost your mom, like a parent dies or grandparent dies, but something happens right in the middle of the chain when we lose a child, and that chain just breaks, and that everybody is almost like not assembled together anymore. Everybody goes different directions. So what is it that you guys can do in your family to be bolder with them? Maybe you've never sat down with them at the table, Christmas table, and really just prayed because you feel like you're going to be rejected, or we've gone through a catastrophic event in our lives. So as far as I'm concerned, we have every right, if you will, to be able to pray. And I don't think that anybody is going to turn you down for doing that. I feel as though it's to be very welcomed and comforting. So, but is there anybody that's got something in their plan as to what they want to do to get to know Jesus more? What are you guys going to do different? Chirp, 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 chirp. Well, and that could be between you and him, but I would just think that at some point, if you guys really feel like you have one of those moments, such as when I did when I was having worship between now and then, you're may feeling embarrassed or whatever to share, but you're going to bless others by stepping up and talking about it. So I'm going to continue to challenge you guys, and I want to see some smiles out there right now, despite the time that it is and the upcoming Christmas. That's better, because I've seen you all smile. because I know that it's there. Well, is everybody good? Like everybody, nobody's got some unanswered questions, statements, whatever they want. Now is your time before we come to a close. No? Yes? No hands raised? Well, I know that, I know that I haven't met some of you here, and I look forward to being able to meet some of you. Oh, Cinda, there's a hand.
Let me unmute and let me video. Okay.
Oh, there you
Hi.
are.
Hi, Cinda.
It's nice to see you. Thank you so much for this time. I just felt really compelled that no matter how busy it is, I'm just going to do this, and take time with the Lord and with you ladies. And I just want to thank you for, just like what the other ladies have said, but just sharing your heart, sharing your pain, and making it okay that we can share that too. I just remember, Kay, when you prayed with me at church, it was maybe only a week after I lost my son, Ben, to overdose. And it's just one of those things. It was one of those moments that I just needed, Jesus with skin on, and you were it that night. And I really thank you for that. I've been to, several of your Breathe events and, other grief events. And one thing that really stood out to me was when you were talking about being on the walk in San Diego, and it was at night, the one I believe was a suicide walk, and how you guys had lanterns and you couldn't really see where you were going up ahead. But when you turned to look, you realized how you were a light to those that were coming. And one of my close friends just lost her brother. And I didn't really feel like I was in a place with my grief yet to come alongside her, but she needed me. And we had some really beautiful moments. I went to church with her and her husband, and we sat in the car and cried. And, just it made me realize how important that is, that we can be available even when we're not ready, even if we feel like we're not arrived there yet, or we have, all the answers, just to be that ministry of presence, and just love and pray and cry with those who are mourning. And that's been a really big lesson for me. I just want to continue to be available to whoever God brings in my path. And so thank you for being a great example, both you and Jackie, of doing that. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Cinda.
And Cinda, thank you so much for your leadership down there at Saddleback. I just got to see Cinda last week when I went down there. My alumni group that's down there that is going strong. So really appreciate you and all the leaders that are within here. You know what? I want to conclude with, maybe, Kay, is there anything that stands out from, as I always tell the ladies, nobody brings scales to the table as far as our loss goes. But and then in presenting to you and how you ever got word of what happened with our landslide, is there anything that really stands out from that time as when we got together, especially like when you met with me and with Marseille? Because it had to have been a shock, right? I mean, that you were presented with this.
Oh yeah, it was, yeah, and it just kind of kept unfolding, the horror and the trauma of what your family was going through and had gone through. I think I'll just never forget it was one of the heaviest. I mean, I've been in ministry 48 years, and it was one of the heaviest days in ministry, was being with you in Marseille and trying to hold with you what you were holding, and begging God that I didn't do or say anything that would be wounding in your complete devastation, because it felt so sacred to be with you in Marseille. So just days after Randy had died and the terrible things that had he had done, and where you were it was just so shattering. And I felt both honored to be able to be with you and terrified that I would wound you inadvertently, and that I didn't know how to carry your pain at all. And all I knew to do was to carry you both to Jesus and just ask him to hold you guys through the unimaginable, and that you would, and that your precious grandsons would, what the enemy had definitely meant to take your family down, that he would not in any way be allowed to win, and that God would restore and rebuild. And
Ugh. Yeah.
and
Well,
he would that somehow you would see the goodness of God in the land of the living again, somehow, some way,
and
and to see that he has done and is doing that is a sweetness.
and thank you, because I remember sitting in the office with the two of us, and you had said, how many days has it been? And and I think we actually said, well, it's already been 10. And you were like, 10 days. That's nothing. And it was, so as I said to Kay, it was like to be where we were at that time. And Randy and Marseille met at Saddleback Church, in the Crave class and everything. And it was, every single step of the way, being in children's ministry, working way up in women's ministry, and all the way through, and then to that day, like the roots at the church and the family, and to be able to sit down and have a conversation with another woman. And I never forget, you said, we are coming together as two moms that lost a son. Yeah. And you said there's no words, and you wish you could take it away. And so therefore God did give you whatever it is you needed. And it was the ministry of presence, I think, as you said, Cinda, earlier, just to be there. And the whole church family was my search and rescue team. The counseling ministry people were my search and rescue team. They were so solid. And yeah, because like most of the counselors had a deer in the headlights look to them when we would present our story. And I will just say this, and we'll bring us to a close, is that the one thing that secular counselors that some of them we had gone to, they just said, something came in that room and said no. And we all know that that's because Marseille cried out the name of Jesus that night, that all 4 of those people that clinically should have been not here are still with us, and I can still hug them and I can still embrace them. And yeah, although that Marseille still loves Randy, believe it or not, like she said, there's just never going to be another man like Randy. And to have the conversations that we have now are 2 women that have conversations that no 2 women could ever have, and still love each other, because we could have been complete enemies after what we had gone through. And it's by the grace of God. Yeah. Yeah, she and I she's just amazing. We laugh and cry all at the same time. In fact, we were just in the house together last week, and the house that we got the information, the house that she had to live in, and walked through all the rooms of the house and cried and prayed. And it was heavy, but at the same time, we just, again, gave all the glory to God. And so I'm grateful to UK and to Rick and the whole church family. And yeah, because look what God has done through this. And never in my wildest dreams would I ever say, like, oh, I'm gonna be like walking this ministry with other grieving moms, because it's not my ministry, it's our ministry. And I'm just humbled to be able to receive and provide whatever he gives me. And I'm so grateful for all of you guys being here. And my deepest prayer for you guys, really, and I know that it was like I said, crickets, and I'm being silly because that's how I deal with things. But is to say that my heart's desire is for you guys to have a huge change in your walk with him by the time we're done. And again, it's not just going to be quick, lickety split. It may take time, but if it's the beginning of this journey, please, you guys, I beg you to make sure that you're planted by the stream, because you're not guaranteed. We're not exempt from anything else happening in life. We're not. Carol can testify to that. And when that storm comes, we want to be ready for that. And we will if we've got him, right? So thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Kay. You guys have no idea how much I love you all. I think you do. I probably told you a million times. I'm so grateful for that. And Kay, thank you so much from the depths of my heart. I even said pretty please to her.
You didn't have to say pretty please. I just was slow in answering.
On a light note, what did I send you for Christmas last year, Kay?
Oh my gosh. Have they all experienced
I think so. They're all shaking their heads, yes.
the little rubber chickens?
Chicken lingers.
But she gave me no explanation.
Look at Lynn's got one.
She just sent me this box, and I'm like, I'm opening it up, and I actually sent her a picture and said, this is a mistake, right? I mean, I don't even, this is not what you were, and she's like, nope, that's what I meant to send. And I'm like, what is it? So then she had to demonstrate it, and I'm just like, you are cracked, Jackie. You are absolutely cracked. And then she sent me a video of moms basically chasing each other, hitting each other with these stupid little chickens. And it just made me laugh. So I gave it to my daughter's family lives in Idaho, and my son's family lives here. So I have videos of two different groups of people chasing each other around, shooting chickens. In fact, I have really high ceilings. I had chickens on the top of my ceiling that would just, after a few days, peel off and then suddenly flop to the ground. And yeah, it was rich.
You're welcome, Kay.
Yes.
Here's one of the chickens.
I
have a whole box I ordered, and that's what we're gonna do this Christmas with the grandkids.
They loved it. They absolutely loved it.
You know, I will say that
I
Kay,
doubted you. I doubted you.
yeah,
and
you
I
did. And I'm
shouldn't.
not sure why after all these years you doubt, but I have to say what she said was, way to go, UPS. You mailed this to the wrong person.
I really did. I thought it was a total mistake. She had meant to send me some elegant, mug or something. Instead, I get this box of slimy yellow chickens.
I think God put me in your life just to keep you on your toes and make you laugh. Maybe that's
Probably. Well, I'm grateful for whatever reason.
yeah, right back at you. All right, you guys. Well, I will let you go. And Rosie, sweet dreams, sweetheart. Like, please, I hope you can go back to bed. And again, thank you to Kay. Thank you to Sharon. And we will see you guys next week. God bless.
Sharon, it was nice to meet you, Sharon, and get to chat beforehand. And God bless you all. And yeah, invite me again.
Would love to.
Bye, everybody. Good night.